Forgotten guests, the glass dome of the conservatory glittered with ice crystals as Olivia Russell adjusted her camera settings. Outside, pine trees bent under the weight of fresh snow, and the sky promised more to come. She glanced at her watch, almost 7. The estate staff had departed hours ago, leaving her alone with the exotic specimens of Nikolai Castero's private botanical collection. Just one more series, she murmured, focusing on a rare blue orchid. The commission to photograph Castero's collection for a botanical journal had been unexpected. The reclusive tech innovator rarely allowed outsiders onto his property, let alone into his prized greenhouse. But her reputation as a botanical photographer had apparently impressed him enough to make an exception. She hadn't met him, of course. His assistant, a formal woman named Penelope, had arranged everything, emphasizing that Mr. Castero valued his privacy above all else. He occupies the East Wing. You won't see him, and he expects not to see you, Penelope had instructed. The first snow pellet hit the glass with a sharp ping, followed by another. In minutes, the delicate tapping transformed into a roaring onslaught. Olivia packed her equipment quickly. The roads to Castero's mountainside estate were treacherous in good weather. In a storm, they would be impassable. At the conservatory door, she fumbled with the handle. Locked. She tried again. Harder this time. Nothing. Through the glass, she could see the security panel glowing, redarmed and secured for the night. Hello? She called out, knowing the futility of it. Staff had forgotten her, and the automated security system had engaged for the night. Her phone showed no service at the remote location, and storm-making communication impossible. For 20 minutes, Olivia tried every exit, finding each one sealed. The sprawling mansion stood silent and empty around her, or mostly empty. In the East Wing, Nikolai Castero remained unaware of her presence. The temperature in the conservatory was dropping. Without the daytime heating system active, the glass structure would become uncomfortably cold as night progressed. Reluctantly, Olivia made her way into the main house. If she had to be stranded, better somewhere warm. The mansion's interior was minimalist, almost austere, all clean lines and monochromatic surfaces. Nothing like the vibrant life contained in the conservatory. She found a small sitting room with a fireplace and settled in, unsure if using the furniture constituted trespassing given her circumstances. The grandfather clock in the hallway had just struck 9 when she heard footsteps. Soft, measured, approaching slowly. Olivia stood, uncertain whether to announce herself or hide. A man appeared in the doorway, tall, lean, with dark hair, threaded with silver at the temples. He wore simple black clothing, no shoes, and held a steaming mug. His expression shifted from surprise to wariness as he saw her. "Who are you, and why are you in my house?" His voice was quiet, but carried an edge of authority that made Olivia straighten. "I'm Olivia Russell, the botanical photographer. I was working in your conservatory when the security system activated. I'm locked in." She gestured helplessly to the window, where snow now fell in thick sheets. "I've been trying to find a way out without disturbing you." Nikolai Castero studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, one corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Appears," he said, taking a sip from his mug, "that we have both been forgotten by the world tonight." Midnight conversations, the kitchen and Nikolai. Castero's mansion seemed at odds with the rest of the house. Warm cedar cabinetry and copper accents instead of the clinical white and steel that dominated elsewhere. Olivia wrapped her fingers around a mug of spiced tea, watching as her unexpected host moved with practiced efficiency, assembling a late dinner from his well-stocked refrigerator. "I'm sorry about this," she said for perhaps the third time. "Your assistant Penelope was very clear. About your privacy requirements?" Nikolai placed a wooden board of artisanal cheese, bread, and fruit between them on the island counter. "Penelope is efficient to a fault. She likely assumed you'd departed with the groundskeeper." His voice held a slight accent she couldn't place. Eastern European, perhaps, softened by years elsewhere. "The storm wasn't in the forecast until after you arrived. Still, I should have checked out properly." Olivia selected a slice of pear. "I lost track of time with the Paphiopedilum venustum in your collection. The coloration is extraordinary." Something in Nikolai's expression shifted. You know orchids? I know most plants. It's more than my profession, it's been my life since childhood. She smiled slightly. My grandfather was a botanist. He raised me after my parents died. For the first time, Nikolai sat down across from her. The blue orchid you were photographing it was my mother's favorite. She cultivated the original specimen in our apartment in Bucharest, on a tiny windowsill that caught morning sun for precisely 43 minutes each day. You grew up in Romania? Olivia asked, sensing the opening of a door rarely unlocked. Until I was 12. Then America, scholarships, eventually MIT. He cut a perfect wedge of cheese with surgical precision. The conservatory was the first. Part of this house I designed. Everything else came after. The conversation meandered through the hours as the storm intensified outside. Nikolai, initially reserved, gradually revealed fragments of himself, his breakthrough algorithm that revolutionized quantum computing, his discomfort with the celebrity it brought, his retreat to this remote property 5 years ago. People think isolation is about misanthropy, he said, refilling their glasses with a complex red wine. Usually it's about preservation. Of what? Olivia asked. Of whatever remains undamaged. His eyes met hers directly for the first time. What about you? Always traveling, documenting ephemeral beauty, running toward something or away? The question caught her off guard. I've never stayed anywhere longer than 6 months since college. My work takes me around the world's rainforests. Alpine meadows, botanical gardens. That doesn't answer my question, Nikolai observed quietly. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, its resonance filling the silent spaces between them. Olivia found herself describing her nomadic existence, the relationships left behind in various continents, the sensation of perpetual impermanence that had become both comfort and curse. My grandfather used to say I was like certain species of orchidean epiphyte that grows without needing to root in soil. She traced the rim of her glass. I've built a life on that identity. And yet here you are, grounded by a snowstorm. There was something almost gentle in his observation. Later, showing her to a guest suite, more luxurious than most hotels she'd stayed in, Nikolai paused at the doorway. The formal businessman from their first encounter had dissolved, revealing someone more contemplative. The plants in the conservatory need specific light cycles, he said. The automation system maintains them, but I check each morning. If you'd like to join me, he stopped himself, as if surprised by his own invitation. I'd like that, Olivia replied, equally surprised by her eagerness. As she settled into the plush bed, listening to the storm's fury against the windows, Olivia reflected on the strangeness of the evening. She had photographed the private collections of celebrities and royalty, stayed in palaces and mansions across the globe. Yet something about this unplanned encounter felt different. If the howling wind had blown her not just into Nikolai Costero's house, but somehow past the carefully constructed barriers of his existence, and perhaps, more unsettlingly, past some of her own. Flourishing beyond walls, 3 weeks stretched into 6, and winter softened toward spring. The mansion's transformation progressed room by room. The formal dining area now hosted a vertical garden of edible herbs and flowers. The main staircase, wrapped around a living sculpture of apophytes. The austere home office opened to a small indoor pond where aquatic plants filtered the water for Japanese koi. But it wasn't only the house changing under Olivia's influence. Nikolai himself seemed to be thawing, his precise movements gaining fluidity, his conversation becoming less measured. The man who had once scheduled his rare video conferences for exactly 17 minutes now lingered over dinner discussions about symbiotic plant relationships and adaptive growth patterns. You've added 27 minutes to your morning routine, Olivia observed one day, finding him examining the new living wall in the eastern corridor instead of beginning his work. That's a significant deviation for someone who times his tea steeping to the second. Observation requires attention, he replied, gently touching a delicate fern frond. Growth happens in the margins of the schedule, not within its lines. They worked together daily, now Olivia designing, Nikolai engineering the technical systems to support her visions. Their collaboration had developed its own language, part botanical terminology, part architectural shorthand, part private references that accumulated like rings in a tree trunk, marking the passage of their shared time. In the evenings, they often sat in what they now called the forest room, formerly a barely used parlor, now transformed with climbing vines and understory. Plants that created a woodland atmosphere. Here, their conversations wandered beyond professional boundaries into personal territories. "Why did you disappear from public life?" Olivia asked one night, the question she'd held back for weeks finally emerging. "Your innovations changed computing. Forever. Then suddenly nothing. No conferences, no interviews, no public appearances." Nikolai was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had retreated to the careful neutrality of their earliest interactions. 5 years ago, I developed a prototype adaptive algorithm, potentially revolutionary for personalized medicine. My business partner wanted to monetize it immediately. I insisted on more testing. His fingers traced patterns on the arm of his. Cherry went behind my back, implemented a beta version in 3 hospitals. There were ... complications. A patient died. "Sorry," Olivia said softly. "The company survived. I paid settlements, fired my partner, redirected the research." His eyes fixed on something invisible. "But I couldn't reconcile with being part of a system where innovation outpaces wisdom. So I withdrew to focus on theoretical work-safer mathematics, untethered from human consequences." The revelation illuminated so much about him's isolation, his precision, his retreat into the controlled environment of his estate. "And now," she asked, "has anything changed?" He looked around at the living room, at the careful integration of natural systems with human space. "Perhaps, you've shown me that growth requires both structure and adaptation. That isolation preserves, but also limits." The following morning brought an unprecedented development. Nikolai appeared in her workspace with outdoor clothing and hiking boots. "There's a meadow on the western property line," he said. "Alpine wildflowers begin blooming this week. I thought perhaps we might observe them, for inspiration." It was the first time he had suggested leaving the house in all the weeks she'd been there. Their hike through melting snow revealed a man she hadn't fully seen before, one who identified birdsong by species, knew the geological history of each rock formation, who stopped to photograph a particular light pattern through pine branches for her collection. Outside the confines of his controlled environment, Nikolai moved with a different energy, as if the wild spaces activated parts of himself long dormant, standing in the meadow where the first purple shooting stars and yellow glacier lilies pushed through the receding snow. Olivia realized something had fundamentally shifted. What had begun as a professional project had grown into something neither of them had anticipated, a transformation not just of space, but of the people within it. That night, working late in her studio, Olivia found herself designing something new, not for the house, but for herself. A permanent installation, a place to stay. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. For someone who had built her identity on perpetual motion, considering stillness felt like free-falling. When Nikolai appeared in her doorway with tea, as had become their custom, she quickly covered her sketches. But something in her expression must have revealed her internal turmoil. "What is it?" he asked, setting down the mugs. "My next assignment," she said carefully. "The botanical gardens in Singapore. They're expecting me next month." "Ah!" A single syllable, devoid of inflection. "Then, of course, you have commitments, a life beyond this project." The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities neither seemed ready to articulate. "The East Wing renovations will be complete by then," he finally said. "You'll have fulfilled our agreement." "Yes," she agreed, though the word felt hollow. "Everything will return to its proper order." But as she looked at him standing amid the botanical drawings and material samples that had consumed their shared weeks, Olivia wondered if either of them truly believed that anymore. If, like the plants they'd cultivated together, they had already grown to intertwine, to separate without damage. Morning light revelations. Dawn broke with piercing clarity, the storm having exhausted itself sometime in the night. Olivia woke to sunlight refracting through ice-laced windows, transforming her guest room into a prism of scattered rainbows. For a moment, she forgot where she wasn't, a hazard of her transient lifestyle. The memory of the previous evening returned gradually. The unexpected lockdown. Startled tech mogul finding her in his sitting room. Their surprisingly intimate midnight conversation. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, feeling oddly self-conscious in a way her normal professional engagements never evoked. She found Nikolai in the conservatory, methodically checking instruments and examining plants. Barefoot again. Wearing simple linen pants and a gray Henley, he looked more like a scholarly gardener than a billionaire tech entrepreneur. "The roads are still impassable," he said without preamble, adjusting the moisture control for a cluster of tropical ferns. "My groundskeeper called. The plows won't reach us until afternoon at earliest." "I'm sorry to impose further," Olivia began. "You're not." His response was immediate, almost defensive. Then, more softly, "It's refreshing to have someone who appreciates these specimens properly." Together they moved through the magnificent glass structure, Olivia noting how each section maintained distinct microenvironments for different botanical communities. The design was ingeniously the work of someone who understood both the science and the poetry of plant life. "Did you design this yourself?" she asked, admiring the irrigation system that mimicked natural rainfall patterns. "The original blueprint? Yes." Nikolai gently turned a bromeliad to optimize its light exposure, but it evolved. Living things require adaptation from those who tend them. Over breakfast in a sun-drenched morning room, fresh bread delivered weekly and stored in the freezer, explained. Nikolai surprised her with a proposal. "Your portfolio? I reviewed it before approving your access to the conservatory." He spoke carefully, as if navigating unfamiliar terrain. "Your botanical photography transcends documentation. You capture the essence of living spaces, how light interacts with chlorophyll and cellulose, how spaces breathe." Olivia felt a flush of unexpected pleasure at his assessment. "Thank you. This house is..." He gestured vaguely at the sterile perfection surrounding them. "It functions as required, but it lacks integration with the life in the conservatory. The division is too absolute." He looked directly at her. "I'd like to commission you to design botanical installations throughout the main house. Living walls, suspended gardens, natural light optimization." She stared at him, caught off guard. "I'm a photographer, not a designer. Your compositions suggest otherwise. Your eye sees relationships between space and growth that most designers miss." His fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the table. "Consider it an experiment. Stay a week. If your concepts don't align with my vision, we part ways. No obligation." "A week?" Olivia rarely stayed anywhere that long without having another destination already planned. "The eastern section has private apartments you can use. Complete independence. But access to all areas of the house for your planning." He added, almost as an afterthought, "The connection to the conservatory would provide materials for mock-ups." Practical considerations surfaced her scheduled assignments. Her apartment in Seattle sitting empty, the logistics of an unexpected week in the mountains. Yet beneath these considerations, something else stirred curiosity about this strange, precise man and his isolated world, about the challenge of bringing life to spaces designed for sterile perfection. "If I agree," she said slowly, "I'd need complete creative freedom. Within structural limitations, yes. And you'd need to be involved in the process. I can't design living spaces for someone without understanding how they inhabit them." Something flickered across his expression, hesitation, perhaps, or a recognition of the implicit boundary being crossed. The man who valued privacy above all else was being asked to become visible. "Acceptable," he finally said, extending his hand formally as they shook on their improvised agreement. Olivia felt the strange sensation of roots beginning to form beneath, her feet tentative, exploratory, but unmistakably reaching downward. For someone who had built an identity on never being anchored, the feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. Outside, the sun continued melting paths through the snow, slowly clearing the way back to the world beyond the estate. But for the first time in years, Olivia found herself in no hurry to depart. The garden within the morning of Olivia's scheduled departure dawned with disorienting perfection clear skies. Mild temperatures, roads completely passable. No convenient storm would extend her stay this time. Her bags waited by the door, her camera equipment packed with professional efficiency. The car Nikolai had arranged would arrive in exactly 47 minutes. She wandered through the transformed mansion one last time. What had once been sterile and austere now pulsed with carefully orchestrated life. Each room flowing naturally into the next, through botanical transitions that made the enormous house feel cohesive and alive. Her finest work, unquestionably, a portfolio milestone, would likely attract similar commissions around the world. Yet as she touched the living wall in the main corridor, feeling the gentle moisture of moss beneath her fingertips, Olivia experienced none of the satisfaction that usually accompanied a completed project. Instead, a hollow ache had taken residence beneath her ribs, the sensation of leaving something unfinished. Though every contracted element had been perfectly executed, she found Nikolai in the conservatory, adjusting the new integration system that connected the climate controls between the main house and the plant sanctuary. The division that had once been too absolute now barely existed. "Everything's functioning perfectly," he said, without turning his attention on the monitoring tablet. "Humidity transfer, temperature regulation, light synchronization systems are now interdependent." "That was the goal," Olivia replied. Hearing the inadequacy of her words, he finally faced her, his expression carefully composed. "Your Singapore assignment, how long will you be there?" 3 months, documenting their new cloud forest biome. The project that had once excited her now seemed distant and formulaic, and probably New Zealand for their native fern conservation program. A perpetual journey. His voice held no judgment, merely observation. "It's what I do." The words emerged automatically, an identity statement she'd repeated countless times across continents. For the first time, they rang hollow. Nikolai nodded, his gaze drifting to the blue orchids that had first captured her attention months ago. "I've prepared something for you." A parting acknowledgement. He gestured for her to follow. They walked to his private study, once a fortress of minimalist design, now transformed with living elements that complemented rather than overwhelmed the space where he conducted his research. On his desk sat a small, exquisitely crafted wooden box. "Open it," he said simply. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a perfect glass terrarium no larger than her palm, a self-contained ecosystem in miniature. Complete with condensation cycles and balanced plant communities, it's designed to require no maintenance, Nikolai explained. A closed system that sustains itself indefinitely. You can take it anywhere without disrupting your mobility. The gift was thoughtful, perfectly aligned with her nomadic existence. Yet something about it, perhaps the very idea of a contained, isolated ecosystem, struck Olivia as profoundly sad. "Thank you," she managed. "It's beautiful." "I had considered offering you a permanent position," he said abruptly, expanding the botanical integration to the exterior grounds. "A year-long project, minimum." Olivia's breath caught. "Why didn't you?" "Because you've built your life on freedom of movement. To ask you to root yourself here would be to fundamentally change the essence of who you are." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Even in botany, transplantation carries risks." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the quarter hour, marking the approaching moment of departure. 32 minutes remained. Olivia looked around the study, at the man who had withdrawn from the world only to create an extraordinary one within his isolation, with the transformed spaces that now reflected both his precision and her organic vision, at the small terrarium that symbolized containment and freedom simultaneously. "What if," she said slowly, "there were other models to consider?" Nikolai looked at her questioningly. "In nature, not everything needs permanent roots. There are symbiotic relationships, organisms that connect temporarily but meaningfully. Migratory patterns that include returning to significant locations." She placed the terrarium back on the desk. "Perhaps the choice isn't between permanent rooting and perpetual motion." Something shifted in his expression, cautious recognition of the conversation beneath their words. You're proposing an alternative model. I'm proposing we consider adaptation. Growth requires both structure and flexibility, remember? She moved closer. Singapore can wait. New Zealand, too. Other photographers can document ferns and cloud forests. And what would you document instead? His voice had dropped too barely. Above a whisper, the evolution of this place. Of your work. She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Of whatever this connection between us is becoming. The silence between them hummed with potential energy, like plants bending toward light, like systems finding equilibrium. Like people discovering that isolation and movement were not the only options available. The car will be here soon, Nikolai finally said. Olivia nodded. Unless I call and cancel it. Unless you do that? The moment balanced on a knife's edge of possibility. Nikolai reached for his tablet and extended it to her, a simple gesture that somehow contained volumes. The numbers in my contacts, he said. Under transportation? Olivia took the tablet, their fingers brushing in the exchange. As she made the call postponing her departure, she watched Nikolai move to the windows overlooking the estate grounds. The spring sunlight illuminated him differently. Now, not as the isolated figure she'd first encountered in the midnight kitchen, but as someone gradually turning toward connection rather than away from it. When she joined him at the window, he pointed toward the eastern hillside where the snow had recently melted. There's a natural depression in the landscape there, he said. With proper engineering, it could become a reflective pond for aquatic specimens. A new project, perhaps. A significant expansion, Olivia noted, already envisioning the possibilities. Growth happens in the margins, he reminded her, echoing their earlier conversation. And more quietly, I've discovered I have more margins than I realized. Outside, the driveway remained empty. The car now redirected elsewhere. Inside, two people who had built identities on different forms of isolation stood contemplating not just a landscape's transformation, but their own finding in their unexpected connection, something neither had been looking for, but both had, perhaps been seeking all along. Not an ending to their separate journeys, but the beginning of a shared one. Not roots that trapped, but connections that nourished. Not a closed terrarium, but an open garden with room to both grow and wander. A different kind of home than either had imagined possible.